Good afternoon, everybody. And maybe for some, good morning. There's some people from the US time zone following ContentGrid. I'm happy to welcome you for the second session of AI in ContentGrid. We had one earlier today. This is the second one, probably the best one. And my name is Ronnie Timmermans. I'm the managing director of Xenit. And the main course will be served by the AI lead engineer that we have at Xenit, Ranik Belpere, talking about the potential and the integration of AI in ContentGrid. I just want to highlight a few key points, key elements before we jump into the impressive presentation. That is, what is the problem that AI helps us to solve in ContentGrid when we manage a lot of content, a lot of documents, whatever, unstructured, semi-structured? Well, we are fighting against content chaos. And content chaos is a natural state of information systems, and it grows with the number of places where you can store maybe copies, versions of documents, and you can share it with whomever for whatever kind of time period. It's very productive for the individual, but very hard to control for the organization and to make clear. However, organizing and protecting content can be automated with an accuracy beyond the best human effort. And that is where AI comes in and helps us in every aspect of content services. You either hire a bunch of librarians or you empower AI to help you organizing and protecting content, not just finding things back, but also making sure that things that are sensitive are not found. ContentGrid applies a process of discovery, modeling, and automatic extraction to to automate all of that for you. We can look at documents, a document set. We can discover a structure that makes sense to your users. You can refine it in modeling, and then you can exploit it in the end user applications. When you add content, we can extract properties, we can classify that content, we can link it to other entities, which makes it a very rich, very natural model for your users. It is important to know that creating this kind of cognitive clarity cannot be a one-off effort. The world is changing. In 2 years, you might be working with other partners, other products, and it is simply not doable by hand to reclassify and restructure that information. You need to have a virtual cycle that is continuously running to improve the quality of your document and your content service. So 3 of the main topics are discover, model, and extract. How does discover look? We can look at your content and analyze it with embeddings, vectors, whatever. There is insight to gain in your documents. Ranik will talk more about that. Once you've discovered it, you could take whatever you have discovered as being categories of documents, properties, attributes, relationships, take that into the ContentGrid console and refine the model until you think it's really perfect for your understanding of your content system today. Once you have, and of course, we have an AI assistant helping you to do that in the best possible way. Once you then have refined the model, then we will exploit that in the end user application of ContentGrid, your archive. Whenever you add a document, it will be analyzed, it will be classified. This could be an invoice. You could have properties of the invoice. All of that will be recognized, and it will be an interactive, augmented process with the human in the center of the loop. We will also show how you could have natural language querying of the system, which is kind of the nec plus ultra of a content service experience. And of course, this does not stop in just making the model once. It is a continuous virtual cycle of continuously updating the model, adapting it to the new reality. This is what I wanted to say, set the scene a little bit, and I will pass the stage now to my colleague Ranik that will demonstrate all these wonderful features to you.
Thank you, Ronnie, for the introduction. I will quickly share my screen. So, welcome everybody to the ContentGrid AI webinar. In this webinar, I will show you how you could use our ContentGrid AI to turn your content chaos into content clarity. First off, I want to say this webinar is being recorded, so you can always rewatch it in a later time frame. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A section of the webinar interface. So, turning content chaos into content clarity. First off, what is content chaos? A typical example of content chaos is when there is an enterprise which has its business intelligence saved within a file folder structure on a file server somewhere. There might be certain rules, or there might not be rules, about how documents should be classified, handled within that folder structure. Also, different employees might have different views about how this content should be classified, which folders you should create, and so on. As your enterprise grows, this will become messy very quickly. So, this is why we at ContentGrid try to turn this chaos into clarity and by means of AI help you with that task. So, first off, in this webinar, the first demo will be about semantic clustering of documents. After that, I will show you our data model AI assistant. And finally, we will actually upload documents and we will do automatic metadata extraction. So the ContentGrid data model, what is it all about? So in ContentGrid, the first thing a customer needs to do is to create a semantic model representing the business intelligence of its enterprise. In this case, we see an insurance company who has 4 different concepts or entities, and these entities all can have different attributes, which are forms of metadata, and then there can also be relations between these concepts. So for the insurance case, we have a contract. A contract has different attributes, for instance, a name, which is a text field, a content field, which is used for saving content, an effective date, which is a date field, and a status, which is text. Then we can also see that documents can have a relation to other documents or other entities. And we, for instance, see that a product is linked to a contract, and a contract can have multiple invoices. Once this data model is created, we will generate an application with clear APIs for you, and then you can actually interact with your entities, create new relations, and create new documents. So the main pillars of ContentGrid is first off, the data model is the source of information, and we have 3 main pillars in our architecture. First off, we are a document management system, so content storage is very important. Second off, we have a rule engine who will protect your documents, who will help you to place the correct access control. It defines who can see what. And then finally, we have a relational database built upon PostgreSQL. Next to that, we also have configurable automations. And for your running application, you can enable a different types of automations. I today will be specifically talking about the AI services. On the left-hand side of the diagram, we show that we can also interact with third parties using our clear REST API. And on the right-hand side of the diagram, we show our front-end applications. This is called Navigator. Navigator will come across in the last demo. This is a web interface where you can interact with the ContentGrid application. So first off, I need to tell you a little bit of technical background so you can actually understand what is happening. So in the first demo, I want to show you semantic clustering. And what is semantic clustering? It is actually a machine learning model which can recognize similarities between words. This model is built upon the transformer architecture, like the famous LLMs. And the LLMs are also making use of word embeddings. And what does a word embedding model do? It takes as input a word, a sentence, or a complete document, and it transforms it into a list of numbers. This list of numbers is called a vector, or in this case, a word embedding. So we can see that we have the word cat, kitten, dog, and houses, and each of these words gets a different vector representation. Now, looking at these vectors, I cannot immediately understand any correlation or similarity between them. So that is why we use a trick called dimensionality reduction. With dimensionality reduction, we can actually plot these highly dimensional vectors into a two-dimensional space. And now we can understand two dimensions and we can visualize it. So now we can actually see what the model is doing. As I said in the beginning, the model is capable of detecting similarities between words, and that we can see in the visualization. Words that are close to one another are highly similar, like cat and kitten, and words that are not non-similar, like the word houses, is further away from a specific word. In this case, we can also see that dog is still quite close to cat and kitten because it is also an animal. So the main takeaway from this slide is when you see a visualization of this, points that are close to one another are similar, points that are farther away from each other are not so similar. Now, what have I done to actually use this technology is I transformed the content chaos of an enterprise into this semantic modeling, and I now actually display the graph of earlier. And instead of words, I actually use the documents from within that file folder structure. So when I hover over the points, I can already see the first page of the document. And looking at this small cluster of similar documents, I can also immediately see that they are similar, in fact. At the bottom here, we also have some documents with different layouts, but they might all be talking about a similar topic, which we will explore in the next dashboard. So we will now start modeling, and I will start from a loaded data set, the one I showed you earlier. So now we arrived at the ContentGrid machine learning workbench, and this workbench will actually help you transform the documents we have indexed with the word embedding model into a ContentGrid data model. That data model we then can later use to create a ContentGrid application, and then we will upload documents to that. So this is the first case. We have only one entity. It is called entity 0, and we can actually view it as unlabeled. What do I see here is the three clusters from earlier, and now we can actually take a deeper look into them, and I can actually preview the documents. So at the cluster at the top, I see, okay, it is an order placed by John Doe, and he has bought some hardware. Okay, when I click on a similar document, I can see that they are all highly similar. And for instance, here we can see that this is also about a purchase order from an online purchase. So clicking on those, I can see, okay, it's two different customers, but the content is highly similar. And here we have a more kind of Xenit document asking invoices for different software services. So we see they are related to software services that are being sold. So these are actually invoices for our consultancy. What I want to note is also these documents are generated, so there is no real information in them. Okay, so we now created our own view about what's in the data set, and we can actually now start and creating the different clusters. This is why we use the left-hand side of the screen, and we can see that we can do a manual mode and an automatic mode. I will now choose manual mode, and I will generate a first content model. So I use this clustering algorithm to identify the three clusters within the dataset. And now we can actually see that we ended up with 100 documents of entity 1, 50 documents of entity 2, and 50 documents of entity 0. At the top view, we can also see a word cloud showing the most common occurring words within the documents from this cluster. So for entity 0, that was that online purchases. We can see, okay, it was ordered and it was a purchase overview. For entity 1, we see at the bottom side, indeed, coming from Leuven and the word invoice, also attached invoice. So that gives us a good idea. And then on top, we have the order files, and we can also see, okay, order confirmed and shopping. Okay, so that gives us quite a good idea. But now, for the first time in this webinar, we will actually use the help of AI to understand really the meaning of those documents. So what is now being done is, instead of us having to look through all those documents and finding commonalities between them, we will actually feed those documents into our assistant, and we will ask the assistant to create a data model for us. So without prior knowledge, I feeded some of the documents to the assistant together with the cluster information, and we can now see that we have created 3 different entities now with a meaningful name. When I click on the entities, we can also see that the assistant has proposed me some attributes I could use within the ContentGrid application. So for the purchase receipts, which was the online purchase receipts, we see that we have a customer name, an order ID, the payment method, the product list that was bought, and a billing address, and then a VAT number. So that is quite nice. And we get a coherence value at the bottom. The coherence value actually quantifies how well the cluster is defined, how well do all the documents fit within one cluster of this entity. This value goes from 0 to 1, so a value of 0.9 is quite good. And we can also visually see that it is quite confined, so I am happy with that. Similarly, for the customer payment acknowledge letters, at the top, we can see that we get an invoice date, an invoice number, the amount due, and contact information. Also a coherence value, which is quite high. And finally, we get the order confirmations. For an order confirmation, we get an order date, order number, and shipping address, and so on. Now, we see we have a coherence value of 0.9 here. We are happy with that. If we wouldn't be happy with that, we could also further divide this one cluster into 2 separate entities by using this subcluster button, which I will now do because we are happy with the results. And finally, if you don't know how many entities you would want beforehand, we also have the automatic mode. And here we can define the minimum, and the groups will keep on clustering until the coherence threshold of each cluster has reached a certain value. So then you don't actually need to choose how many entities you will have. So, okay, we have created the data model. And now I will press this button to copy this data model in a textual representation. Why do I use a textual representation and do not create the model itself? It is actually to showcase our ContentGrid assistant. So the assistant can be called by clicking on this button. And we have now arrived at the second demo of this webinar. The interface you see right now is the ContentGrid console. It is an interface to manage your different ContentGrid applications, to create your first data model, and to define permissions automations on your ContentGrid application. So now we have started a conversation with our ContentGrid assistant, and we can see, okay, the assistant is ready to help us, and we can now paste the textual representation of the ContentGrid model we created earlier in the previous demo. So I ask for a transformation of this textual representation into a content grid model. And for the different attributes, he needs to decide the correct type, make them searchable, and also generate descriptions for the entities. Then I provided the representation in text form. And what we also can see is that each of the different types has a type unknown. So I ask of the assistants to help me with that. And what we immediately saw is that using function calling, the assistant is actually doing the work for me. We can see it is adding attributes to different entities coming from our data modeling from earlier. And we can see that the types of the attributes are in fact correct. Clicking on these points, we can also see what he has done exactly. Now we can follow up the progress within the schema, and we can look into the different attributes that are being created for the different entities. So while he is finishing up his last task of creating the order confirmation receipts, we can actually take a closer look at the data model we have created. Why I chose to use a textual representation of the model is actually to showcase you that the assistant can take any input that is textual, or for instance, a document or a picture could also work, to import that, and then you can transform from your own software into the content grid software using our assistant. So he has finished. He tells me, okay, it has been completed, and he has created the purchase receipts with different attributes, created a description for that, and we can see the other entities and other attributes. If I now want to make changes, I can do that manual also. I can change the name, or I can create more attributes or add relationships if I would want to. So looking at our content model now, we see that we have an entity, and for each entity here, we see that there is an attribute called customer name. So what would be good is to actually extract the customer name and create it into a different entity. That is now something I would like to showcase with the assistant. So I will now say I would like to create a relation to a customer. And then we can see how he will try to assist me with that. So to create a relation to a customer entity, we will first need to create the customer entity itself. And then we can do the different relations between the existing entities. So now I will tell him to go ahead with that. And we can see if he can extract the customer name into an entity for that customer. Why is it useful to have a separate entity with a relation to a customer? Is because then we can, for instance, have a list of all our existing customers. And when I go to a customer, I can see all the things he has bought online, the different invoices for that customer. And that gives us a better way to search for intelligence within our enterprise. So we can see that the transformation has been done to a separate customer entity. And we can see, okay, we have a customer. And now what I would also like for my customer is, for instance, to have a name attribute. So I can do that myself, or I can ask the assistant to do it for me. But now I will quickly do it myself. And we can see, okay, now we have created the different entities from earlier, and I have a new concept called customer. Also, a good other question is, for instance, how could I improve my model? And then the assistant will also give you tips how you could even take it a step further and to improve the model yourself. So now we are done with creating our data model, and we can actually create a release and deploy our application. Because that takes some time, I will skip that step, and I have actually deployed a very similar application already. Now for the next part of the demo, I would want to show you the navigator site, our web interface, where you can actually interact with your documents. So as we've seen before, we also have the e-commerce receipts, the order confirmations, and the invoice communications, and also a list with customers. So when I go into the different invoices, I can see how many invoices there are in the system. Currently, there is only one. And with this search form, I can find the different invoices, for instance, for a specific customer. Now I will show you the process of uploading a new document. Can quickly drag and drop my document. It is something from my data set from earlier. And we will now use the ContentGrid extract feature to help us with filling in the metadata. So a normal flow is you will upload this document. You can then select the different attributes you want to use. For instance, I see here total due is 947. I can do a total amount, but now let's say that I have made a typo. Okay, we will see if AI could help me correct that by actually doing this automatically fill in the metadata of this document. So now we've seen an extraction has come in, and we can see that the form is completely filled in, and in my document itself, there are some things highlighted. How can I now look into this extraction? First off, we have a complete report of all the different extractions. But what is more useful is that if we actually press on this small icon here, we can see that the PDF scrolls into view. And for the invoice date, it has found this value, the 15th of December. And we can see a small explanation by our assistant why he thinks this is a correct value. On the top right of the extraction box, we also see a value which is actually the confidence of the model, indicating how confident he is that this is a correct value. So in this case, he says, okay, I'm 95% certain that this is correct value, which is indeed correct. I need to say this is the only date within the document, so that one was quite easy. Then we have the invoice number, for instance, the company name, and so on. Now, for this total amount, you can see we are here have a different color, meaning that the AI thinks you might have made a mistake. And then you can actually click that and see, okay, here I found the total amount, and it is 947, not 948. So I can quickly override this value, and now the warning goes away. Finally, as I showed you earlier, we extracted the concept of a customer into a separate entity. The extraction is actually also able to detect relations to other entities. So in this case, the customer is linked to invoice over a relation. But what we can see is that we have actually found a customer within the document. Her name was Jane Doe, which is correct. And we can see a small explanation. Now, when I want to make this relation, my search form gets filled in automatically, and I can see if there exists a customer. If yes, I can link it. And now finally, I can create a document using the extract feature. This is the example of an AI automation. So what is interesting about this feature is actually it looks at all the different attributes we've defined earlier. And when you update your application, you add new attributes. Depending on the type of that attribute, the assistant will make a correct guess. And actually, you don't have to do anything in the front end. When a new attribute is added, it will be also added to the extraction. This is another example of the e-commerce document. We can see that it has found an order date. We can also adjust this order date if we would like to. And we can see the different shipping addresses and so further. For here, he has also found a different customer named Maria. Okay, so that is what I would like to show you for the extract feature. And finally, as the last demo, I would like to show you our natural language querying. So we know that we have a search form here where you can do different range queries, for instance, search for a specific customer. But what we also could do is actually ask for help of the assistant. And now I say, okay, I want to find all the invoices of Jane Doe in the year 2023. The value needs to be between 500 and 1000. And we can already see that the assistant has given me a filled in form where we can see, okay, from the year 2023, the 1st of January until the 1st of January of 2024, so the complete year, the total amount should be between 500 and 1000, and the customer name needs to be Jane Doe. So that concludes this webinar and this demo. So what have we seen is actually we took a bunch of documents, used semantic modeling to actually find what's inside the documents and create a semantic model for that. Then we used the AI assistant to further improve this model. Then we deployed our application and actually uploaded the document. And using the assistant, we automatically get predictions, get feature extractions of the different documents. And we can now start with interacting with our content, searching content, and actually finding more insights over the complete collection of documents. So thank you. And I will quickly look if there are questions. So there is one question asking about what about the cost of the LLM behind the assistant? So yes, that is a good question because what we actually want to do with this LLM and assistant integration is actually to quick start customers to create a first data set of documents with metadata. Once that first data set has been established, we can also train specialized models for your content, and that will, of course, be much quicker and indeed cheaper to run than using the LLM for interference right now. Also, the accuracy will be then improved if we train those specialized models. So this can help you get started. And I think paying an employee to do this metadata extraction himself is more expensive than using an LLM right now. And we can see that the results are quite nice from all my tests. So with that, I would like to conclude my part of this webinar, and I would like to give the word back to Ronnie.
Great. Thank you, Ranek. I think that was a lot in 30 minutes to see. Of course, fortunately, we are recording the webinar so people can look at it, zoom into, ask us questions, because as a closing note, I just wanted to share this with you. In overview, I think we've seen that the foundation of ContentGrid is a strong model, entities and relationships. By the way, it has proven its value over many years. So why reinvent something new when something very decent and strong and future-proof is there? It has been designed, ContentGrid, to benefit maximally from all the ways of AI that will help us to automate almost any routine task to do in content and also assist you with complex queries if necessary. We've seen discovery, modeling, and intelligent interaction and extraction. So we want to put AI at work in the grid. Finally, a few pointers. Join us in our lab. Look at the website. From the website, you can join the lab. Enter into discussion. Be creative. Give us your views, your opinions, and ideas. And you can also, of course, have a test run with data and documents of yourself to just experience how it could work. 2 pointers, my email at the contentgrid.com address. We also have Xenid address, of course, and Ranex. You can reach both of us or colleagues to discuss your case. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found it inspiring, and I am looking forward to see you in the next webinar on ContentGrid. Thank you.